Hello everyone. Usually I wait until I 100% a DLC or game before I review it, but being so behind with everything with Avatar, my pre-order not going through, and having to buy the game through digital services for some reason is taking forever. I'm just not going to be able to beat the Final Fantasy difficulty trophy in the time being, so all the other trophies I've collected, I'm just missing the difficulty trophy to beat the entire DLC on Final Fantasy difficulty. So hopefully my review will still carry some merit, regardless of not 100% in it. Also, this review will contain spoilers since Echoes of the Fallen takes place at least halfway through Final Fantasy 16. So if you haven't completed the game or don't want to know about major spoilers within the campaign, I'm going to try and mitigate them as much as possible, but it's near impossible to not talk about certain major points within the core narrative since it is foundations within the Echoes of the Fallen DLC. So this is your first and only warning, spoilers ahead. So Echoes of the Fallen takes place halfway through Final Fantasy 16, with the crystals slowly collapsing as Clive tries to destroy all of them as they siphon energy from the planet. We find out that a new type of crystal is being distributed among the populace. These things are black crystals called dust crystals. They provide the same services as the core crystals, however they disintegrate after one or two charges, causing the populace to become extremely frustrated by these black market crystals that are surfacing all around. So Clive is going to investigate because, as we already know, the crystals from the main campaign siphon energy from the planet, and if this crystal operates under the same conditions, it needs to be stopped. It doesn't take long for Clive to find the source of the crystals. In fact, it's insultingly easy for him to find out who's been distributing these crystals. The narrative definitely speedruns to a lot of the information, and in terms of lore, you might get your fill if you're really into Final Fantasy 16's narrative, especially the Fallen. You'll find out where they reach the pinnacle of their civilization, and a lot of cool details here and there, but for the most part, it's just one track through a single line. There are no optional stories or quests. It's simply this one narrative, and if you're not into Final Fantasy 16 story, you're not going to get a lot out of this. In terms of gameplay, it's more of the same. It's the same excellent combat system. You won't gain any new abilities or icon abilities. You'll get some equipment which will determine on your playstyle whether they're worth it or not. I did think that they were worth it because they offered more options for parrying and dodging, and you also get a very powerful weapon once you complete the DLC. Now, there are an array of boss fights throughout the campaign. However, the difficulty definitely takes a huge spike at the end with the final boss. Now, if you're a veteran within the Final Fantasy franchise, the final boss will be reminiscent of a specific super boss that we've all encountered, and it definitely pays tribute to the super boss. Despite it being integral to the DLC and completing it, they did this boss justice. Now, the difficulty spike, as I stated, is extreme here. Like, all the other enemies are pretty much easy. They're just hyper aggressive versions of existing enemies that we've already faced, but the final boss definitely takes a huge leap in difficulty for you to defeat it. In fact, I'm pretty sure the developers noticed this and they separated the fight into 3 phases, and each time you get to a new phase there's a checkpoint, so if you happen to fail you'll be able to start from that specific checkpoint instead of having to fight the boss all over again. I don't know if this is true for Final Fantasy difficulty, but be prepared for an extremely difficult yet rewarding final boss that's going to test all your skills. In fact, I would argue that the final boss for this DLC is harder than the core campaign's final boss. As I stated, this is just one long quest line. There isn't a lot of optional paths, and they still sell you on the presentation. It's an absolutely gorgeous DLC, and when you get to the tower section of the DLC, you can see all over Valistea, all the places you've been, and it's really damn cool. But at the same time, it's kind of mysterious that no one really noticed this tower in the distance, considering how much power it's been generating. But it's definitely a very well presented DLC. The musical score goes really hard here, especially for the final boss. Oh my god, the music in this game is exceptional, and they do not skirt on the presentation for the final boss. I know I'm hyping up this boss to be this amazing, exceptional fight because it is. The only major issue I had with it is that it can become a little overwhelming with all the things that are happening on screen. I wish I could show you this, but it will go deep into spoilers. But regardless, if you have trouble keeping track of things in the core campaign's final boss, it doesn't get any easier here. You're just going to have to adapt. The same goes for defensive systems such as parrying, even jumping. I never jumped when I played the game, but you have to get used to jumping as well to evade a very specific attack. But is this DLC worth the asking price for only 2 to 3 hours worth of content with no optional things to do? It definitely feels like just one long premium side quest, but as someone who really loved Final Fantasy 16 as one of his favorite games of the year, I got my money's worth. I enjoyed it, and I had a blast playing throughout the entire campaign. But for people who just didn't really click for Final Fantasy 16, or they just found it as a mediocre experience, this won't change your mind. It's simply for people who want more Final Fantasy 16, want some bit of lore to complement the existing story, and some more combat challenges to engage with. So if you're hungry for more Final Fantasy 16, you can't really go wrong with this DLC. I do hope the next expansion does offer more optional content in terms of, side quests or maybe some more hunts, but this is a really good appetizer for what should be a major expansion for the next piece of DLC.